Control Agency Board of Directors of May 21st, 2020 to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you. Matt Conwell.
Yes, here, present.
Nick Avdis. Chris Burns.
Chris is there.
Let's see if you can find.
I'm here.
Thank you. Brian Holloway. Cyril Shaw.
Here.
Angelique Ashby. Jeff Harris.
Present.
Rick Jennings. Sue Frost. Here. John Natoli. Susan Peters. Patrick Kennedy.
Here.
Lisa Nava. Here.
Damn it.
We do have a quorum.
Can't be that bad.
Yeah. So if we could remember to mute our phones and not curse in a public meeting, that'd be awesome.
No cat throwing.
This is fun.
Do you have a message, Lindy?
I do not have any announcements today, Chairman Kennedy.
Okay, then let's call the first item.
Excuse me.
You there?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm trying to move my recording.
Okay.
Our first item is the Executive Director's Report for May 21st.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing well. Just wanted to hit a few items today. There's a lot going on. Lindy, if you could go ahead to the next slide, please. Okay, I did want to, we do have an issue coming up with the Folsom Dam raise I did want to make you aware of. As the Corps has been moving forward with the designs on all the dams and dikes, they've realized that they're going to be significantly over the funding that was provided. Just as a reminder, the Folsom Dam is being funded as part of the emergency supplemental funding. And so it was, we had received 100% federal funding for this project, but it looks like we're going to be over. And so the Corps is in the process of updating the cost estimate. They're doing an official estimate to try to determine what the magnitude of the problem is. Lindy, if you can jump to the next slide, please. So in the meantime, while we're waiting to see what that final estimate is, we've been helping, SAFCUS for resources, and we're all working on courses of action. So we're looking at things we can do to help reduce the cost of the project, considering changing the order in which construction is looking at changes to the designs themselves. We're evaluating maybe using parapet walls instead of embankment raises or a combination of both. And we expect that all this information will be finalized by early June. So Lindy, if you can jump to the next one there. So the result will be, there'll be a change control board held at Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C. They're looking at the July timeframe, and we'll have two outcomes from that. Now, when Congress gave them the pot of money, the Corps allocated almost all of it to projects. They held a little bit back for some projects that might go over a little. However, as you might expect, there's quite a few projects coming in asking for more funding. So we're going to have to go back and compete. Hopefully, we're trying to get the cost estimate down as much as we can so that we'll have a good benefit cost ratio. We'll have one or two outcomes out of what happens in July. One is we can get it down to a point where the Corps headquarters will feel it's still a good project that is better than some of the other ones that we're competing to fund it. Or the second would be is if it's too high and they just don't have enough funding, then the result might be stopping the funding completely for the project. So we're in a pretty critical couple of months here for that project, and we should know more by the next board meeting as to how far over we are. But I wanted to make you aware of that's happening out there. So Lindy, will you jump to the next slide? On the more positive note, we do have a lot of construction activities going on. There's 9 projects currently going. 6 were Corps in the lead and 3 were Sacra's in the lead. So, Lindy, go to the next one there, please. We'll talk about the Natomas project first. There's 4 contracts going on in Natomas right now. I'll start with Reach I, which is down along the bottom. That one, as you know, construction went through all last year, and it's going through this summer too, to be completed this fall. Currently, they're working on putting the slurry wall in on top of the Garden Highway and the part of Reach I that's west of Interstate 5. And then they're trying to get that done quickly and then move over and finish the other end of Reach I later this summer. Jumping up to Reach D, which is up on top where they were filling in, moving a canal that was at the toe of the levee and doing some work around the pumping plants. All that's left to do right now is monitoring wells. I think they're waiting for a little bit better weather, and that's done soon. Down in Reach H, which is at the lower end along the Natomas East main drainage canal, that one also started last year and will be completed this year. Right now, they are working on the slurry wall just south of El Camino where it crosses, and they've already crossed El Camino. They had that closed for a little while, and they've completed that and crossed it. And then Reach B, which is over along the Sacramento River, it's the part where they built part of it, and the Corps is finishing it up. It'll be 2 seasons to complete. They're just getting started. The contractor just got all the permits he needed and is waiting for final approval on his permit from the Corps, and then we should start seeing activity out there real soon. So that's kind of an overview on the 4 contracts on Natomas. So, Lindy, if you can jump to the next one. So, jumping over to American River Common Features 2016, this is the map. It's busy, but that project is all over the place here. So there's 4 contracts on that one. SECA's in the lead on 3, and then the Corps on 1 of them. So on the first one in the pocket area, that's the slurry wall and levee stability work that's being done down there by the Corps. That will be done this year, and I've got a couple of pictures in the following slides to show on that one. Up in the north area there, SAFCA, that's the contract we've been working on for a couple of years, and there's just a few items to finish up there. So we'll be completing that shortly. Number 3 are over on Bright Landfill. That's the one where we thought we had it done last year, but then as they were going towards the end of the year, they found out that the landfill had actually gone on to adjacent property, and so we're going in now and chasing the rest of the cleaning that up also. And then the last one there is the mitigation for these projects. Beachstone Lake, it's down a little off of the map actually for most of it. We just finished the plantings and are now in monitoring phase. So, Lindy, if you can jump to the next slide, please. Show a couple of the photos that Pete Galfy sent me from the Corps work on the pocket area down there. One on the left, Bruce pointing that out, so you can see how deep the existing levee had to be to get down to a point where they would get rid of the bacterial and then also have a platform wide enough for the slurry wall machinery that's coming along. And then on the right is a picture just showing that the Corps has put out monitors along there, along some of the homes, so they can monitor to make sure that the vibration from the truck traffic isn't too excessive there. So if you can go to the next one, Lindy's there. And then this is just a wider angle lens showing the excavation down of the levee and the degrade. So jump to the next one there, please, Lindy. So jumping over to Folsom Dam. So the ironic part of Folsom is that it's already under construction. So that's why even more important to make sure that we can keep the funding going. Dike 8 it's almost done, actually. It should be finished in June. If you go to the next slide, Lindy. The one on the left there, we put, as part of the dike reconstruction, they put a sand filter in there that's supposed to intercept the water, and put that in because even though they're still finishing it up, it worked as planned with this last rain that we had. Over on the right, that's the work looking from the west side back towards the east side, which is the El Dorado hillside over there. Lindy, if you can jump to the next one. And then this is looking the opposite direction from the west side to the east. And so in this picture, the reservoir is off right, and the land side is on the left. There's actually a church down right below the left out there. So, Lindy, can you jump to the next slide, please? Changing subjects a little bit, on May 1st, Congressman Matsui introduced into the House of Representatives H.R. 6684 on our behalf. That's our YOLO bypass program. And Congressman Garamendi co-sponsored the bill. And this was introduced as a standalone bill. We expect that it'll get pulled into the Water Resources Development process. Just as an update on that, the Senate came out with their version of WARA, and it did not include our bill. So it's even more important that we're able to get it into the House version so that we can try through Congress committee to try to get it in the final WARA bill. I do want to thank both Congressman Matsui and Congressman Garamendi for supporting us. And in particular, Congresswoman Matsui and her staff are going out of their way to help us a lot on this and the dam raise and a number of other items. So, Lindy, can you go to the next slide, please? So with that, I'll just see if there's any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, Chair, I do have one.
Yep.
Rick, can you explain why the cost overruns on the dam raise have gotten out of control?
Well, a couple of things. One is when the supplemental, we were in the process of actually getting a new design and cost estimate raised when the supplemental funding became available. So the core district, in an effort to make sure they could get the funding, put together a very, very quick estimate. And we were always concerned because we really hadn't finished the design yet. So I was always a little worried about that. And then when they got into design, they've been fairly conservative because we do have a requirement out there is as the #1 dam safety dam in the country based on the potential for failure. And so we've been very conservative with the designs to make sure that they don't do anything that would increase failure risk from the dam. And so I think they've probably overbuilt or overdesigned some of the sections. And so that's what we're looking at right now to see where we can make some reductions, still keep the design safe, but maybe not quite as conservative as it had been before. But I think the main thing was we just didn't have the design done yet when we had to give the initial estimate.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Through the chair, Matt Conant. Hey, Rick, do you guys have any idea how much we're short? Are we talking significant, or is it just a small percent?
That part,
or no
that's
idea?
That's the part I don't know. So what Corps headquarters did is they're making the district go to. The district has a center of expertise for cost estimating in Walla Walla, Washington, and they're making the Walla Walla district go through and do the cost estimate for this. And so we should be seeing that pretty soon. But until we see that, I'm really not sure at this point, which is a little bit of a frustration. It makes it a little harder to know how much of a problem we have.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I was just curious if you had any crystal ball out there.
Yeah, I don't right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is that it, Rick?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will go to our consent matters, items 2 through 11. Is there anyone who has any questions on consent or would like something removed?
This is Director Holloway. I'll move
Mr. Holloway.
the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Director Holloway, second by Director Conant. Please call the roll.
Matt Conant,
Yes.
Nick Avdis,
Aye.
Chris Burns,
Aye.
Brian Holloway,
Aye.
Cyril Shaw,
Aye.
Angelique Ashby, Jeff Harris,
Aye.
Rick Jennings, Sue Frost,
Aye.
Don Natoli,
Aye.
Susan Peters, Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Lisa Nava.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, on separate matters, item number 12, please read item number 12 into the record.
Item number 12 is information presenting the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you, Chair Kennedy, members of the board, Jason Campbell, Deputy Executive Director. Just wanted to present to you what we're planning to bring forward in the June budget proposal to you. The budget what you're going to see here in just a couple minutes or over the next few minutes is the presentation that was provided to the Finance Committee last week. The presentation's about 20 slides. We should be able to roll through it fairly quick, and we will seek your input and guidance as we get to the end here. The next slide, please, Lindy. So when we look at our budget, we first have to start with our finances. This graph represents the all funds that we have. So we have fiscal accounts and we have cash operating accounts, which we primarily work from for our funds. Currently, SAFCA has just under $180 million in cash equivalents in both sets of funds, both the fiscal and the operating. Next slide, please. And in the cash and the fiscal accounts, it's broken down primarily into 3 smaller groups. One very large group, which is 96% of our cash on hand in fiscal, is our Consolidated Capital Assessment District. This fiscal account recognizes the funds that we've obtained through assessments as well as through bond issuances, including the most recent one in 2020 issuance in March. And then, of course, we have our Natomas Basin Local Assessment District. This fiscal account manages the debt service and the collection of the assessments for the Natomas Basin Assessment District itself. And then we have Hanson Ranch, which is a trust fund for some property in the northeastern part of Sacramento County. Next slide, please. Then on our cash operating funds, we have 4 operating funds that we function with and we provide appropriations for. So, of course, we have our Operations and Maintenance Assessment District, which is about $12.4 million in operating funds that are collected from the assessments, as well as other revenue sources, such as operating transfers in from the other funds for labor and also reimbursements and interest that may accrue over the course of the year. The Development Impact Fee is the, can you go back, please?
Sorry.
The Development Impact Fee represents about $19.4 million in the operating funds this current year. A large portion of that is the actual fee collections, but we also have appropriate or cash that is available as reimbursements because the Development Impact Fee is also producing some projects for the state through agreements and reimbursement agreements that we have with the state for the Lower Elkhorn and other activities out on the Sacramento bypass near the Weir and Lower Elkhorn Basin. Natomas Basin Local Assessment District, we do carry a significant amount of money in there as far as cash in the operating fund. That's primarily because we are receiving reimbursements from the EIP agreements that we've had with the state for the early implementation of the Natomas Basin. So that $23 million represents cash that was spent over the past decade coming back to SAFCA in that reimbursement situation. We're holding it in the Natomas Basin Local Assessment District operating fund, so that way we can hopefully be able to use that to pay off bonds in 2024. So that's the current plan. However, we are using that fund to also provide cash flow and other things for the many projects that are taking place in the Consolidated Capital Assessment District, number 2. So again, that's the last of the operating funds in this chart, $17.7 million in current cash amounts as of April 30th, that is. And then this is the fund that we primarily use to deliver many of our projects and activities that we are currently underway in. Next slide, please. So again, for 2021, we're looking at appropriations for each one of these areas. These, you can see, it's fairly obvious when we talk about SAFCA that the primary function of what we're performing is the advancement of flood infrastructure projects and the acquisition of real estate to go with those projects. So the acquisitions and projects component is roughly 2/3 of all the spend that we are proposing. You can see that we have a small provision for reserve for one of our funds. We can get into those details a little bit. And then, of course, salaries and benefits, services and supplies, and we have some operating transfers that take place. Those are all smaller components, but very significant in allowing us to continue to deliver on our programs. And then, of course, we do now manage, this is the second year that we're actually appropriating contingencies. It becomes more important as we see that there are some tremendous flexibility by having the contingencies already appropriated. We see a number of opportunities that could potentially come up given the COVID-19, but we also have a tremendous amount of uncertainty associated with COVID. So the current situation allows that, with having these contingencies built in, allows us to be able to recognize some of the maybe changes in the cash flows that we might see in reimbursements from the state that are planned to be received, or just be able to enact some activity that will support the core program or real estate transaction programs. So next slide, please. So as we look at our project expenses specifically, you can see that these are the primary benefit areas or benefiting projects of our project expenses. The American River Common Features Natomas makes up the largest share of the current proposed expenditures in this coming year. Tremendous amount of real estate and a number of headings of the cores being planned and being designed and being constructed currently in Natomas. So $44.6 million in proposed planned expenditures to support the cores program as well as advance the designs. And then we roll into the American River Common Features, where we have $26.2 million in expenditures, primarily supporting real estate activities and our cost shares for the different various headings for those construction activities. And then we have Elkhorn Basin, Sankey Gap, and Yellow Bypass, which is a plethora of different efforts in different phases. We have design, obviously, for Elkhorn Basin and some of the activities that we're supporting with the state. Sankey Gap, we continue to evaluate ways to mitigate some of the potential issues associated with the Sankey Gap. And then, of course, we have Yellow Bypass, where we are providing additional support and future endeavors to advance the flood protection, as well as support the other activities that we're working on as far as mitigation and support to the core programs. And Rick had mentioned earlier in the Executive Director's report, we do have a number of efforts taking place up at Folsom Dam. We're still closing out the JFP, and we continue to work on the Folsom Dam raise as well as the eco-restoration portion of what is called the temperature shutters. Next slide, please. So as part of our annual budget, we bring forward the different capital improvement expenditures that we identify for each one of the funds. So here you can see the first set is under the O&M assessment district. These would be project funds that are going towards specific designated projects and activities to support those. You can see in the development impact fee, there are a number of projects slated for this coming fiscal year to receive funding. including the Elkhorn Basin Levels Project, which Dan will talk about a little bit more in just a few minutes. But we can see that there's a fairly significant effort there, and that is in support of the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Program, which has some overlap with the Sacramento bypass widening and the American River Common Features 2016 project. So that most of that $18 million for levels is reimbursable from the state. So that is the lion's share of what we're appropriating for in DIF. Next slide, please. And then we roll into the Consolidated Capital Assessment District 2. Again, this is where most of our activity is taking place. You can see the different levels of effort that are taking place in Natomas, as well as down in the Folsom, we have that $25.3 million in support of what could potentially be our cost share on the temperature shutters, but also to make sure that we can advance continuing efforts on the JFP for closeout, and then continuing efforts on the Folsom Dam raise to get it designed and hopefully keep things rolling forward under the supplemental funding. Next slide, please. So as we roll into the operating funds specifically, I would just like to roll through these pretty quick. Next slide, please. We start with the Operations and Maintenance Assessment District, which is identified as Fund 325A. Next slide, please. So under 325A, you can see in the tabular format here that we have the proposed budget of $7.7 million. 3.3 of that is based on salaries. Nearly $5 million is the services and supplies, and then we have interfund transfers of $2.3 million. That includes a couple of things, but primarily that is the reimbursement to the O&M fund for staff time and efforts under the other funds. So we're charging the labor time back to what we would consider our general fund. And then on the financing side, you can see the $6.2 million is the assessments that we collect. And then we have another set of smaller revenue sources that come in. Primarily, the interest that we earn is something that is on the reserves that we have in the bank, which is fairly significant. But we also get some fund balance from this current fiscal year as anticipated, but we have some small grants that are also reimbursed. Next slide, please. This slide up represents the full-time equivalent requirement that we must have to identify the different positions, the salaries associated with those positions, and then the position allocation for each classification. We are not proposing any additional staff changes over this proposed year. Next slide, please. Development impact fee is identified as Fund 325F. Next slide, please. And again, the development impact fee, we have roughly $30.3 million in appropriations being requested. About 26.1 of that is for infrastructure projects. We then balance that out with some fairly significant fund balance from prior year, as well as state grants for reimbursements. Again, those aren't all the state grants. That's just what we anticipate collecting from the state as reimbursements as we move forward. And that little bit of unbalance is based on we need to make sure we have the appropriations as those projects go out to contract. So we will recover the rest of those costs over in future fiscal years as well. And then we do have an anticipated $6.7 million in fees. That may be a little high, and we may adjust that as we move into the proposed budget during June, simply because we're not totally certain how housing starts are going to work for Sacramento, given the COVID-19 situation. Next slide, please. And again, Natomas Basin Local Assessment District, 325G. Next slide, please. Here we have what I identified earlier as somewhat of a pass-through. This is the operating fund that was associated to NBLAD when it was first formed. We now use this as a collecting location for the reimbursements that come from the EIP. And here you can see that as we have in the current year, we've appropriated some interfund charges. That's actually just a transfer from this fund and the fund balances that we have potentially to the CCAD2, just in case we need some additional cash for the different endeavors that are taking place in Natomas. So as we look forward to this next fiscal year, you can see that we have the $10.3 million in fund balance. That's money that we don't anticipate spending in the current fiscal year, carrying over into the next. And then we have a small reserve release to cover some expenditures and other things that are coming in. So the $11.359 million is the appropriation for the Natomas Basin Local Assessment District. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. CC82 is the lion's share, as I said, of the expenditures that SAFCA will appropriate for our annual operations as well as the infrastructure improvements that we support. So again, services and supplies and other charges are actually fairly insignificant in comparison. Relatively large land acquisition and infrastructure expenditures going forward. Specifically from CC80, we anticipate $77.1 million in expenditures, and that would include $10.6 million in appropriated contingencies for some of those unknowns that we may encounter over the course of the year. And then again, we have some prior fund balances anticipated from the current fiscal year on the financing side, and we have a reserve release that would be bond proceeds coming from the fiscal accounts coming into this operating fund. And then we do anticipate roughly $36.5 million in state reimbursements and grants coming from our partners. So again, $77.1 million in appropriations for CC82, and most of that is for our project expenditures. Next slide, please. So I rolled through that fairly quickly. I'm hoping that we can get some input in regards to anything that you may have questions or ideas about what we might want to see in the budget for June for the public hearing.
Any questions? Just chime in and identify yourself.
Yeah, this is Director Burns. I had a question, Jason, on the state money. Are we looking at any impact, or have they given us any kind of warning about any reimbursements or anything being cut back this year, given the governor's new budget may revise?
So Director Burns, thank you. That's a great question. It's one that we're still kicking around on this end. Fortunately, most of the funding that we are seeing reimbursements are from existing grant programs under Prop 1E and Prop 68. So those dollars are somewhat dedicated to these, and because we already have existing agreements, cost-sharing agreements for the different programs that we're talking about, we believe that those are more secure. Our understanding is that there are some actions taking place at DWR and DGS to make some modifications to some agreements, and we will be talking about that a little bit when Dan gets on here. But the idea is that these are not at risk that we're aware of. We have not seen any indication from our state partners, and in fact, the governor's revise identified that some of the general fund dollars that were currently appropriated are still within what he is recommending for the state's budget, as we saw last week. But we know that also could change. So we are trying to make sure that we're anticipating that some of those revenues may not come in, and that's why you see some of the contingencies as well as the operating transfers from one fund to another are in place so that we can hopefully make sure that we shore up those potential revenue shortfalls.
Thank you.
Any others? All right. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you all.
Item number 13.
Item 13, resolution number 2020-64, approving contract documents and authorizing the executive director to advertise contract number 4495 for bid, Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project, Yolo County, California.
Staff report. Is Rena there?
I'm looking for her on here. Let me unmute her.
There you go.
Hi,
Okay,
Rena.
I was on. Thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Kennedy, members of the board. My name is Rena Chawanda, Associate Engineer at SAFCA, presenting the Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project Interior Drainage for contract document approval and approval to solicit for a construction contract. Next slide, please. The Lower Elkhorn Basin levee setback project is located in the Lower Elkhorn Basin in Yolo County. It's bounded by I-5 on the north, Yolo Bypass on the west, Sacramento Bypass on the south, and the Sacramento River on the east. The Levels Project and Sacramento Bypass North Levee and Yolo Bypass East Levee Widening Project are highlighted in yellow. The Sacramento Bypass Setback Levee's goal is to divert roughly the same amount of flow from the Sacramento River channel as is being added to the channel by flows in the American River from the Folsom Dam. This ensures that flows in the Sacramento River channel remains relatively constant upstream and downstream of the American River confluence. In the event that flows in the American River must be raised above 115,000 cubic feet per second and up to 160,000 CFS to safely contain very large floods in the American River watershed. The Yolo Bypass Setback Levee helps to improve the conveyance capacity in this reach, and coupled with future projects will help to improve conveyance capacity of the entire Yolo Bypass. Next slide, please. Timeline history. In 2015, the Corps completed the American River Common Features Project General Reevaluation Report. In 2016, the state began the Levels Project, which includes conveyance improvements to the Yolo Bypass as recommended improvements in the approved 2012 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and the 2017 update. Also in 2016, Congress authorized the GRR and the Water Resource Development Act. The GRR and WRDA 2016 include Sac Weir and bypass widening. SAFEGA and DWR are non-federal sponsors to Corps' WRDA 2016 project. In 2019, SAFEGA and DWR entered into a reimbursable funding agreement for design and construction of the interior drainage and pump station projects for approximately $14.2 million, and currently SAFEGA and DWR are working on amendment number 1 to the funding agreement to increase the contract amount to approximately $24.8 million. Next slide, please. The Levels Interior Drainage Project location. The project would set back levees protecting the lower Elkhorn Basin, thereby increasing the capacity of the Yolo and Sacramento bypasses and reducing flood risks on the upper Yolo bypass and Sacramento River, thereby protecting the greater Sacramento metropolitan area. This image shows the levee setbacks in blue, a portion of the Yolo Bypass East levee and a portion of the Sacramento Bypass North levee within reclamation districts number 537, 785, and 827. The consolidated Reclamation District 537 will be responsible for the long-term OMRR&R after the project is completed. Next slide, please. Selected alternative. The project will replace 3 existing pump stations with a 160 cubic feet per second pump station, construct a 170-acre detention pond, and improve the drainage infrastructure to convey a 100-year, 24-hour rainfall runoff event to drain the lower Elkhorn Basin. The new pump station will be located to the northeast of the intersection of the future setback Sacramento Bypass North Levee and future setback Yolo Bypass East Levee in Yolo County. The proposed pump station is shown in the pink circle, and the detention pond is shown in the purple area. SAFEGA and its design team went through different alternatives with different pump station capacity, pond sizes, flowage easements, culverts, etc., to evaluate the best alternative for this project that the Reclamation District could continue to do OMRR&R on. Next slide, please. Environmental review and permit approvals. Environmental impacts associated with the project were analyzed in DWR's final EIR and addenda for the project in compliance with CEQA and adopted the associated mitigation monitoring and reporting program in March 2019. SAFECA, as a responsible agency, adopted the CEQA documents at last month's board meeting, Resolution 2020-038. DWR has received all of its permitting, the 408, 404, the ROD, biological opinion 401, section 106, and just recently the incidental take permit. DWR is now working on amending the permits to provide coverage for the missing portions of the interior drainage project. It's expected to have revised permits issued by mid-July timeframe. SAFECA will delay bid opening if amended permits are not completed in time. Next slide, please. Land acquisition summary. DWR is acquiring the real estate needed for the project and asked SAFECA to acquire an additional 25 feet needed for the drainage canal on one parcel in the north end of the basin to flatten the ditch slope for stability purposes. DWR has closed escrow on 2 properties, one on the north and one on the south, and has possession through settlement agreements of the remaining 2 properties in the south. DWR, south end of the lower Elkhorn Basin. DWR is working on settlement agreements for the remaining properties in the north end of the basin and expects to have possession by the end of the calendar year. Work in the north part of the basin is set to begin in spring 2021 at phase 2. Next slide. Final plans and specifications, contract documents. SAFECA's consultant, Lagenauer and Mickle, has worked closely with the design team to finalize the design plan set. MBK has assisted the designer to complete the specifications. The interior drainage contract documents are completed for approval. Next slide. Anticipated next steps, subject to board approval. In July, SAFECA and DWR will enter into a funding agreement amendment number 1 for the pump station and interior drainage design and construction work for approximately $24.8 million. In the summer, SAFECA will award the interior drainage contract and begin construction. In the fall, SAFECA will award the pump station contract, and in 2021, SAFECA's construction contractor will complete the interior drainage project, and the pump station construction project will begin in the spring and end in the winter. The pump station contract documents are anticipated to be brought before the board for approval in the summer with award in the fall time frame. Next slide. Board action, consider adoption of contract documents and authorize the executive director to solicit for a construction contract. The plans and specs are 100% complete. Solicitation for the construction project will need to begin in June with award in late summer timeframe. Outstanding items include amending the environmental permits, which is expected in mid-July timeframe, executing funding agreement amendment number 1, which is also expected in July, land position of remaining properties expected at the end of the calendar year for phase 2 work to occur in 2021 for the work in the north end of the lower Elkhorn Basin. Award of construction contract will not proceed until board approval when the outstanding items are complete. Remaining real estate items are for phase 2 work in 2021. Next slide, please. Board action needed, adopt resolution 2020-064 approving contract documents and authorizing the executive director to advertise the contract for bid Levels Interior Drainage Project in Yolo County. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions of the board? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll move item 13. This is Director Shaw.
Okay, we have a motion by Director
Jeff Harris, second.
and by Director Shaw and a second by Director Harris. Please call the roll.
Matt Conant,
Aye.
Nick Gavdis,
Aye.
Chris Burns, Brian Holloway,
Aye.
Cyril Shaw,
Aye.
Angelique Ashby, Jeff Harris,
Aye.
Rick Jennings, Sue Frost,
Aye.
Don Natoli, Susan Peters, Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Lisa Nava. Lisa Nava. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion passes.
Thank you. Number 14 is an informational receive and file. Are there any questions from the board? All right, well, our next board meeting, as you can see, is June 18th. Thank you all for hanging in there with us. This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Lindy.
You're welcome.